Tonight, I'm sorry, scratch that. I said that earlier today was the wrong script. From Denver, Colorado. Okay, where am I? Please forgive
Why
me.
don't you just start over?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. All right, we'll just slate. Hello and welcome to Castle of Horror, the show dedicated to horror movies and awesomeness. This week we have a look at the 2023 film Totally Killer. This is episode 416. Bear in mind, if you haven't seen today's movie, we're going to be talking about it from the perspective of horror fans who have seen it. So warning, spoilers ahead. From Denver, Colorado, I'm your host, Jason Henderson, publisher at Castle Bridge Media, home of the Castle of Horror anthology. With me from Austin is Tony Salvaggio, lead singer and bassist of the band Deserts of Mars, and lead guitarist of the band Rise from Fire. Say hello, Tony.
Howdy.
Howdy. Also in Austin, Mr. Drew Edwards is the writer-creator of the long-running underground comic Halloween Man, which you can find at Global Comics. He is a Best Writer Ringo nominee, Austin Chronicle Best of Austin Award winner, and a member of the PEN America Fellowship. Say hello, Drew.
Michael fucking Myers.
Michael fucking Myers, yes. And finally, also in Denver, color commentary from Julia Guzman of Guzman Immigration of Denver. Say hello.
Hello, everyone.
Hello, hello. All right, Totally Killer, which among us Tony had already seen when he was covering Fantastic Fest for Castle of Horror, which we were so proud of that. He came back saying, "You got to see this." Totally Killer is a 2023 American black comedy slasher film directed by Nahnatchka Khan from a screenplay by David Madelon, Sasha Pearl Raver, and Jerry D'Angelo. The story follows Jamie, played by Kiernan Shipka, who, after her mother's friends are murdered by the Sweet 16 killer on Halloween, travels back in time to 1987, where she pairs up with her mother to stop the young would-be killer and return to her own timeline before she is trapped in the past forever. That is Totally Killer. I can't wait to talk about this and hear what you guys had to think. Julia, it is your turn. We have come around again. So let's go Julia, Drew, Tony, and then I'll go. Julia, opening thoughts. Briefly, what are your thoughts about Totally Killer?
Briefly, wait a minute. Briefly. Does that mean I'm not usually brief?
It doesn't mean anything. It's just it's
we just
written
watched
here.
something. We just what we're
It's written here on the script, and if it's written on the script, I will read it.
We were listening to or watching something where the person. Oh no, it was Slate Political Gabfest, and he
Yes.
was like briefly to the person who's never brief. Like, wait a minute. I feel offended. Anyway, I thought this was a really fun ride. I really enjoyed this movie a lot. I thought they did some neat I wouldn't have thought that you could have done anything original with time travel because there's been so many time travel things. But there were some neat things, some like neat ideas, kind of twists on old concepts. Particularly, I always throw a temper tantrum every time there's a time travel story that does not involve everything just branching off new timelines, and because it really bothers me the idea that the person comes back to a different future and now replaces whatever person was in that body up until this point. It's always bothered me, and I'll talk about
Essentially
it more.
murdering a
Yeah,
consciousness.
and
Yeah.
it's, anyway, I'll talk about it some more as we go along. But in this one, I think they may have kind of resolved that. So I'm interested in getting to when we get to that point and kind of exploring the way that they handle time travel in this movie. But it's really neat. Sort of Scream meets Back to the Future meets a few other things with some neat John Hughes homages as well. So it's all kinds of things that I love.
Thank you very much. And I want to hear about what John Hughes homages you picked up on. Drew.
Well, their name is Hughes for one, and then there's all the Molly Ringwalds.
Oh,
So
right, of
those are the
course.
main things.
All right, sure. So is that it? We don't have to talk about John Hughes anymore?
Yeah,
We're done with it?
it'll come up again.
Okay. Drew, opening thoughts.
So I've seen this movie twice now.
You mean like in the last week you just watched it on TV?
Yeah,
twice?
Jamie and I watched it independently of it being picked, and then I watched it again the other day to just make sure it was fresher on my mind. I think it's okay. Like I think it's fun. It definitely works better for me as a comedy than a horror film. I'm reminded, like, Blumhouse has done a bunch of movies like this at this point. They did the Happy Death Day movies, which are essentially Groundhog's Day with a
Yeah.
slasher. Then they did Freaky, which is Freaky Friday, but with a slasher, and now this
Yeah.
is Back to the Future with a slasher. I think the Happy Death Day movies are probably a little better than this one for me. I also was reminded a lot of Final Girls, which I think is a much better version of this kind of storyline than this is. That being said, like, I don't hate it. I see the backlash on this movie has been it's given me Twitter whiplash because like I remember when it first dropped, there was like a day where everybody loved it and thought it was the best movie ever, and then I felt like literally that evening everybody had decided they hated it by then. If you hate this movie, I think you have a stick up your ass because it's perfectly entertaining. Like it's okay to say something is a fun movie and you still not thinking it's the best movie ever. Like I feel like the hyperbole of the internet has gotten away with itself again with this one. Like, it's neither the greatest slasher movie ever made, nor is it the worst. It's a fun Halloween tie-in, and God bless them for putting out seasonal content. I will take all the Halloween themed stuff that I can get. So
I mean, let me just point out.
I like.
Oh, good. Sorry. Yeah, please.
No. You first.
Well, we're still in your opening thoughts, but I wanted to. I have not been on Twitter, so maybe this is a Twitter thing, and I feel super lucky to be aware. I was not aware that there was.
I've seen it on Facebook too. Specifically in like the Joe Bob Briggs group, and then a couple other horror movie groups that I'm in, and I think I'm probably going to be the most lukewarm out of the group. I would assume, but I have to stress, I still enjoyed it. I watched it twice. It's not a drag to get through. It's a fun movie. And it really does the Back to the Future, your parents were once teenagers and therefore your parents are people thing really well. Like that's the one thing that it does like perfectly. Anyway, I could ramble on, but I'm sure we're gonna.
That's really I've no doubt we're gonna get into it. And I think it'll be important for you to bring back what you're hearing on the internet, because I suppose that's conventional wisdom. I mean, I feel like, Tony, and you can respond to this, but I feel like the internet is a centrifugal force machine of opinion, and so your opinion might be or oh, that was okay, and then somehow by the end of the week the centrifugal force machine will have slammed your opinion out to the extremes, so that it's like the worst movie you've ever seen or it's the best, and which is so silly. Like, why would you get upset about something? But I think that's what happens. Anyway, what are your thoughts?
Well, I've been accused actually of liking it. You like everything. You like too much. Which I was like, okay, whatever, fine. I like things. That's terrible. It's terrible, right? So, but what they're really saying is maybe I'm not as objective because I tend to wear my heart on my sleeve as far as stuff I like. I did watch this again after Fantastic Fest because I will admit that when you're in a setting like a festival, especially Fantastic Fest, where you're hanging out with friends and maybe the director, maybe the filmmakers are there to do a Q&A, like there's the potential that you'll kind of have these rose-tinted glasses. Sometimes that works the opposite, but in general, there's a vibe of like, we're all here to like this stuff. It's cool, and so you tend to be a little less harsh, I think. Some people are harsh anyway, and yet other people are curmudgeonly and they try not to like anything, which I don't ascribe to at all. But I found the lull parts the same, like when I saw it, because again, this was the closing night movie, so it was it took some coffee like by that point, when you've seen 30 something movies,
Sure.
not to bring that up again, but just like that's the extent, right? Like this is the final movie of a sea of movies. So objectivity is also hard to find. But I still found it to be really enjoyable. I think it's really fun. I do, I'm kind of with Drew. Like I think I like it more, but I also think that it is supposed to be a dark comedy more than anything else. I think the references are spot on and timely. I think the modern view of the 80s kind of lens is really interesting too. I think that's
Yes.
I
Yes,
think they
that's
did
very
that
interesting.
pretty
Yeah.
well. There's everything's really bright and vibrant. We're seeing definitely an affluent area, as opposed, like the flip side is the kind of cabin shack of the kids in Stranger Things, right?
Yes.
Like where things are kind of run down, like that. So it's like that kind of flip side of where that's at, and of course there's inconsistencies. People have said like, oh, you couldn't get RoboCop on. I think one of them was like, you couldn't get RoboCop on VHS or whatever. I'm like,
Yeah, but it's
okay.
clearly a bootleg. It's handwritten, so
Right. But stuff like that. But I
Excellent
thought
Also, who cares? This is a movie with time travel.
right.
Yes,
No,
that's
I'm
so
totally
true,
down.
yeah.
I still think it's a really fun Halloween movie. I think it's dark where it needs to be, and has interesting twists, and there's a lot of bits in here that I just really enjoyed. I think the cast is great. Even to the kind of sort of Scream part where it kind of turns around is really good too. Like having somebody having prepared themselves for this event for all this time, like when that
Yes.
happens, that was actually really interesting. So I think it takes a lot of the horror that we love and spins it around, and throws in the Back to the Future and women in science, like all of this stuff where I'm like, yeah, this is I'm down with this.
I think another reason I really liked it is because the parents are exactly my age.
Yes.
So
I mean,
all
yeah,
of this
you
stuff
can
works.
I think Gen X can get it too.
Well, but especially like literally, they're exactly our age. Like that. Like as I've said before in this podcast, my first time to go out to a movie with Jason was for RoboCop, which is why it was not a date, because who takes a girl to a RoboCop for a date? Not that I'm bitter at all.
So,
I don't know what to tell you.
speaking for the clueless men of the podcast, of which I am definitely like very clueless and dumb, and I'm glad that I found Rain, and Rain found me and understood how clueless I am. Like
Yeah.
I can definitely attest to like why is this wrong? Now, I'm not defending it. I'm just saying that, yeah.
I gotta say, I think. Thank you, Tony. For me, here's what I think is going on in some of that backlash, and this can be a mini topic right up at the top. This is a movie that follows a pattern. It follows a pattern of Back to the Future. There is a problem with smart people. Like dumb people, we don't need to worry about. And I'm often a person who can effectively think like a dumb person. But there's a problem with smart people on the internet, which is that their pattern recognition is pretty good. And when they recognize patterns for reasons I cannot put my finger on, they get pissed off. So they say, "Oh, we've seen this before. This is following X pattern. Oh, it's so faithful to the pattern." And I'm like, "Yeah, but so are, I don't know, so is a sonnet. A sonnet follows a pattern. So is a rockabilly song. A rockabilly song follows a pattern. Blues follows a pattern. Patterns are good. There's or patterns. Let's put it this way: patterns are just objectively a thing. They have nothing to do with good or bad. Recognizing how something is supposed to go does not, in fact, comment on its value or its quality. But smart people who haven't examined themselves very well will often confuse recognizability with a lack of quality. And I see it over and over and
Well,
over
and
again.
like I said, I think there's some things in here that aren't that predictable. Yes, the
True.
killers are predictable, whatever. Who cares? But there's other stuff that's kind of interesting. So I don't know. I thought it was fun.
Well, no, you're absolutely right. So I think we can talk about the things that we like about the movie. But I'm just saying that anytime you have something that follows a pattern, smart people will go after it like a fish going after a shiny lure because it gives them something to write about how they recognize the thing. And what they like more than they like liking art is they like aggrandizing themselves. So that's my feeling about internet smart guys. But so this movie, pattern wise, is a rather faithful remake of Back to the Future. I mean, I was amazed. I really kind of got the impression that the writers probably, the pitch was Back to the Future with a slasher, and they probably sat down and wrote down the beats of Back to the Future and said, we got to have one of each of these things, such that, Julia, I mean, we were talking about it when it was playing, like early on. We were like, well, this is Back to the Future, so for some reason she's going to get teleported at a it's going to be a tense moment. Yeah, go ahead.
I didn't get the impression of that in the Q&A. I mean, who knows? Like, you're not going to say like, oh yeah, we just took apart we deconstructed Back to the Future and put it back together again, right? But like, there was a lot. I don't have a video of it, but a lot of it was based on like, hey, we want to tell this story, and we thought the time travel thing was unique, and then we brought out, we also wanted to make sure like to bring in a new generation of how we think of this thing, which is now possibly equidistant to the 60s and the 50s.
Yes, it is. Yes, little longer actually. 85 to 55 is just 30 years. Yeah. She goes 35 years back because they just
like it's and that boy. Now I'm old, but the equidistance of it is
Jason's
also
really
key,
good at
right?
doing that, making you feel old suddenly. Yeah. No, the thing is that makes it 100% Back to the Future is Doc Brown, because it's once you've got Lauren Creston is the character's name, I think. Anyway, she's Doc Brown, and so you have to go back and say, okay, you made this time machine in the future and you wrote about it at this age, so now you need to help me make it work. That's all 100% Back to the Future, except that instead of it being an old white dude, it's a young woman of color, which is just awesome. I absolutely love that little bit. And then the thing I was saying before about the time travel thing is that they don't, even though she comes back into a different future, there was a moment when all of the stuff was shifting reality so that they were able to document in a notebook, even though she's probably now, Lauren's lost probably a lot of that as memory, but she's documented in a notebook all the things that were changing as they were changing, because as everything was kind of changing around them, the podcaster guy still has memories and she still has memories, and then they start to disappear. It's like waking up from a dream, which I love. That was like what I loved. I thought that was really interesting.
She even lampshades it a couple of times. Like she brings up that Back to the Future, and at one point she even says, just imagine that I'm Marty McFly.
Right.
And I think the thing that particularly works with this also being a slasher parody is that the time travel thing is that you're going back to the golden age of the slasher movie, which is the 80s.
Yeah.
So like that is something I think now that I'm saying it aloud, as much as like that's really clever. Whether you agree with how they pull it off or not is up to you, but as a conceit, that's fun. And
well, let's talk about that for a second, Drew. Because I have a question that I want to get to, but this is, I think, just as valid, which is violence. So she goes back to a slasher, and but wouldn't you agree that in fact this made-for-TV film is way more violent than a slasher from 1987 would be?
No, I think it depends on what you're
so?
talking about.
I mean, I think it's way more violent than Halloween. That's for sure. It's
the original Halloween, yes. Some of the sequels, maybe not.
Definitely not more violent than effing RoboCop.
Yeah, Texas Chainsaw Massacre Part 2 is extremely violent, and it's from around this time period. I Madman, another slasher movie from this time. No, I actually.
So you don't agree?
Don't agree with.
I mean, even Halloween 2 was not this bloody. Like
I don't actually think that this is a particularly bloody movie.
The 16 stabs on each of them so that the person takes a
Yep.
long time stabbing them.
But you're not
Um,
seeing the blood. You're
It's
seeing the
it's
stabbing action, you're hearing
brutal.
it.
mm,
Yeah,
Yeah.
you're not really seeing. I don't remember feeling like I was like, "Whoa, I can't look at this." It didn't feel
It
gory, is what
it
I'm saying.
it feels like the violence, I think, feels visceral, but like there's nothing like if this was a Friday the 13th movie, like you have Jason like slamming people into a tree inside a sleeping bag. You have
that's
him
right. That's true.
popping
That's
their
true.
head
Or
like it's a
splitting
grapefruit. Like
splitting them in two. Like
yeah,
literally splitting someone in two. Now
Hellraiser. Think about the original Hellraiser, Jason.
Yeah, that's
Like
true.
the
That's a good
Jesus
point.
wept scene.
Yeah,
Like
Jesus
I
wept.
no,
Yeah,
I
you're
don't.
right.
Yeah, I don't think this is as violent as your average '80s horror
All right.
film.
That's
I
fair.
think
Okay.
I think I will say this to your point. I think there is something in the way the violence is portrayed here that will appeals to maybe your sensitivities more, and that
Mm,
might be because it isn't as over the top. Like
maybe.
you're thinking more about these characters as people that are being tormented. Like the killer in this movie is not a supernatural being. He's not Freddy Krueger. He's a malicious human being, and I
Right.
think that changes perhaps the tone of the violence
Yeah, that's
a
a
little
good.
bit.
That's a good
I would
observation.
agree. I agree because I was gonna say something similar where the violence against these teenagers is actually in many ways as visceral as a Halloween or Friday the 13th franchise or many others. Like the killer will go away and come back and stab them, make sure they
Yes.
get the requisite 16 stabs, like stuff
Yeah.
like that, which is extremely violent. And they are screaming. Like there's I thought Rain might want to see it, and then I kind of thought the better of it. Like I was like, I don't know if she's, without me kind of fast forwarding around stuff. It didn't feel like this would be a movie she would, even though she would enjoy a lot of it. It is the kind of 10 to 20% that I was like, I don't think this is for her. But
Well,
I agree that it is, like, I don't think it's definitely not as gory as a lot of stuff, but it's definitely the parts that are visceral are still very visceral.
Yes. Okay. I stand corrected. That's a really really good point. I mean,
I
outside
think it
of
also has like the tonal whiplash thing that the
Yes,
screen
I would
movies
agree with
have.
you. Yeah.
Like it goes from being very funny to, oh my gosh, here's somebody being stabbed 16 times.
16
So
times,
like, and I think that is also maybe why some people are reacting negatively to it, because like it is tonally all over the place. And although like that is something that I sometimes enjoy, because I actually feel like that is true to, not that real life has time travel, but that I feel like real life has tonal whiplash. So like I never quite understand it when people don't like that in their films. Like I think that real life changes genres, depending on your time of day. So
it doesn't bother me. I mean, I can imagine. Yeah, it doesn't bother me at all, to the extent that the tone shifts here. It doesn't shift. I don't think it shifts objectionably. I mean, it doesn't veer all the way into a lot of slapstick. It stays within some pretty predictable parameters,
well, I think the killer is never really portrayed as funny. Like his mask is funny. It kind of makes him look like a cross between Billy Idol and Beavis from.
Yeah, I have no
I
idea
thought
what
I
this mask
thought
is supposed to be.
I thought
Yeah.
Beavis and Max Headroom.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I didn't think about it. It totally is a Max Headroom thing, but the mask is a bit funny. But like the killer himself, like they tend to play him as stone cold serious anytime he's on screen. So
Yeah.
like it's like, look, I didn't love this movie the way some people did, but like there is clever stuff here.
I just say that the mask is supposed to be Max Headroom and Billy Idol because of the
Oh,
earring.
interesting.
Max Headroom without the glasses.
So,
which would make sense because Billy Idol exists in this time, like in this time frame, and not Beavis, but
Correct.
we as an audience easily could make that just because, especially because of the hair, the pompadour, right? Like,
Yeah.
Yeah.
but
I I
Max Headroom was definitely like I felt that they came across that pretty well.
also Johnny. There was a Nickelodeon character.
Johnny Bravo.
Yes, I think that's right. Who with he had a tall blonde pompadour
Yeah,
and wore
that was
sunglasses.
90s though, right?
Yeah, right. It wouldn't work. It'd be anachronistic, but that was what I was thinking of. But
Sure.
so the here's the main thing that I think this makes this movie kind of special because nobody else has bothered to do this. Nobody's done a Back to the Future remake that I'm aware of. So this is as close as we're gonna get. And I remember thinking about this 8 or 9 years ago. I was like, what if we do this, and we go back 30 years ish to the 80s? What would be the commented on things? And I remember thinking, I fooled myself. I was wrong. But I was like, well, unlike the 50s to the 80s, the 80s to contemporary times is not so different that there would be enough to talk about. But this movie discovers a lot of stuff to talk about. And I was so pleased by that. I thought it was really funny. And I also thought the movie doesn't necessarily, the movie takes sides a lot, but it also pokes, I think, gentle fun at Kiernan Shipka with her modern concepts for everything. And what were some of those patterns we saw? Smoking is everywhere.
Oh well, Drew, I thought it
I
was
loved
funny.
the wood paneled station wagon full of smoke. That was
Uh,
hysterical.
Yes.
well, Drew was, Drew always does a comment, and I meant to I forgot to do mine, which was with a serial killer where Gloria Vanderbilt.
Right.
But the
Yeah.
color, the fabric, and the colors,
All of it.
a lot of it was really, really quite perfect. I loved it, but not the hair.
Uh,
The hair was not right for the '87.
that's definitely true. But I think it's interesting because what I kind of dug is there's enough kind of ribbing of the 80s were wild, yo.
Yes.
But not in a okay boomer sort of way, to use more slang. It felt like,
No, it was just how
yeah,
everybody was so just casually sexist and casually
Yes.
racist. It's so
Actually,
true.
sexual behavior.
All the things she was calling out the people for, my kids would so call us out for. Like it would be exactly what they would say.
Yes.
Just everything like that's not okay. Like what are you even doing? I can't even remember the examples, but there were so
Well, the
many
constant
things.
so their friend who's a football player is constantly sexually harassing everybody, grabbing his crotch,
And
talking about
bullying,
sexual
yeah, and
topics.
bullying people just
And she's
casually.
always like, that's not how we behave. So we've turned people into better behaved people who would,
Absolutely.
not last 10 seconds in the 80s
100%.
because the 80s is a tougher it's so funny. This movie makes it seem, and maybe there's some truth here, like the 80s is this like Viking era and you had to be strong or die, basically. Like if
well,
you
That's
had
there's a
basically
lot of
right
really
though.
bad. I mean, yes, because I mean, we talked about like
Yeah,
just
yeah,
I
stuff
was bullied, Tony
we
was
as
bullied.
weirdos
Yeah, absolutely.
encountered. But
yeah,
also the flip side though, and it's been talked a lot about on the internet, like the flip side of that is now there's become this like we were so tough as Gen X, and younger generations are like, look,
yes,
you're not helping
which is
yourself here.
tiresome,
Like
right? I mean, yeah,
some of
yeah,
that is true. And as for me as Gen X, I'm so happy that people can watch Doctor Who and play Dungeons and Dragons, and
yeah.
video games are just like we all play video games. We have like a bunch on our phones. Like I love that. Like, yeah, there's a certain kind of forgotten latchkey kidness of Gen X, and those are the things I try to embrace. But a lot of the memes of like we were the last generation to tough, like, oh my word, come on.
Yeah, I agree.
Like and it's something, some of those are funny, right? Like, but you'll see the backlash of that is like, okay, so next. Now I do think that there's a lot of like where I've even encountered like, well, that's what an old person would say. It's like, come on, for real. Like, I'm trying to
Well,
be cool
look,
and help and like be a nice person. Like, give me a
somebody
break.
once made the
But
observation, Tony, that if the line was from Alan Alda, it was, if it bends, it's funny. If it breaks, it isn't. In other words,
yeah,
any of these things can cause you to laugh, or any of these things can cause you to go, hold up, now let's get
right,
serious for a second, because that broke in my mind,
right,
and it made me mad, and I want to address that. By the way, Woody Allen
right.
wrote that line, and he's very problematic now. So
Oh,
it
that's a
breaks and it
shame.
isn't, basically. But
Yeah.
that's the problem.
um
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, and I often don't comment because like, what am I? if you comment on the things where people are calling me out for being old, then you're just gonna also sound old.
Yeah,
So
but
I
this
just
is a
try to
podcast
scroll
made up of
past.
all of us,
Like,
so you're
maybe
free.
I'll fume a little bit, or maybe I'll go, oh, but I want to be a friend too. Like, I like I said, like I like that there's a whole, things are great. There's a whole complexity, but I just myself, I find myself really going, there's a lot of terrible stuff in the world right now, but I like that there's a bunch of things that have changed that
Yeah.
I fully embrace, and I think it's cool. Especially like, I've worked in media companies for a long time, so like especially at Research, I worked with a bunch of people who were literally like half my age. That's just
Yeah.
the way the demographics were. And so learning from that and like looking at it and really, and occasionally I could go, somebody would be like, oh, I'm doing my D&D, campaign, and it's cool, and all of my friends are doing it. And I'm like, oh man, it's what's it like to not be accused of being satanic by the mass media? But also I could go, oh, well, if you're doing Dungeons and Dragons meets sci-fi, have you seen Star Frontiers, which is I think now out of print? But stuff like that. Like I think that's cool. But I the smoking part, like all the bits they're calling out are actually like were pretty good. It didn't feel stabby. It felt like, this doesn't make sense in a modern world.
The thing is, you can have a bit that I think one thing that happens on the internet, I love the internet. It's one of my favorite things in the world. I've left Twitter, but I'm now on Blue Sky. And one of the things that happens on the internet is that people lose their ability to discern between a bit, which can make you go, oh, that's interesting and funny, and I'm whatever, and a thesis, so that you can do a bit about how, boy, you wouldn't last 10 seconds in the 80s, in the words of Bernie Klein, versus a thesis where you're like, well, is it moral for us to think like that? And those are two different things. One is comedy, just observational humor, and the other is whatever.
I think you described basically the difference between bit and thesis. I think you described basically the chaos engine that is Gail Simone's
yes sure
a Twitter feed.
The women
like,
right oh yeah, and she loves to chat with everybody. Yeah,
you're just like, oh my. And then
like
if you don't, it becomes this whole
She's hilarious. I love watching her. I mean, I wouldn't do it because it seems to me that I mean, it seems like a second job. But I love how she just trolls everybody by saying these inane things. Like, how come there were never any? Like, she'll just say the most crazy thing. Like, how come there were never any sequels to Alien? And then,
that's what I'm saying though. Like what you described is like bit versus thesis.
Yes,
is literal.
Yes.
That's literally that.
Yeah.
Feed.
So this movie is
wait before you move on. Not related to the whole bit versus thesis, but a funny bit to me. Although it was a little bit inaccurate as far as time goes, is the dodgeball thing. That just the horror of dodgeball and how very evil it was. But what's not accurate is that they had these pretty colorful, smooth balls. Like, oh no, we had all red, rough rubber balls that were horrible.
Heavy rubber balls. They weren't heavy, medicine balls, rough. But they were close.
No, and they were rough. They weren't smooth like that, and they were bigger than that a little bit, and they were all red.
Yeah.
In various states of being inflated.
Exactly.
I love the laissez-faire bit about it. Yeah, dodgeball, everybody's going to do it. Everybody's going to dress out. So what if, and so you
and
may
the clothing
ask,
for the gym. Yeah.
What if you have special dietary needs? What if you're epileptic? What if you, what
doesn't
if
matter. Get over it.
Yeah, exactly. Or don't go, or be basically excluded from society is the reality. She's so accustomed to our world where we've just chipped away and tried to make it more inclusive for everybody.
And I really feel like this movie, that's one of the reasons I like it. I feel like this movie does this better than I think any other movie I've seen, of just really showing us the differences. Like there's plenty of movies that are that take place in the 80s, but with a 2020s vantage point.
Yeah.
But this one actually, I think, does a great job of going, no. I want you to look at how different things are now.
Well,
just look.
Yeah.
To what Jason was saying too. I mean, we did get that in Back to the Future, where we're like, whoa,
yeah, but Back
that's
to the Future
not how
was
that
made. Yeah, Back to the Future was
Right.
made a long time ago. I'm saying now today's viewpoint
Yeah.
of what the 80s were like. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
We've updated that to this new version, which is also fascinating. I think that's kind of where I'm getting at. Like exactly.
And it's constantly moving. That's the other wild thing to me, is that is that what that means is that your awareness of improvements that have been made in our world, and by the way, some things you're nostalgic about, is a constantly sliding. It's the steel guitar that is the time-space continuum. That little tuner is moving, 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 as the moving finger writes, as Khalil Gibran says. And yeah, so we've moved along, and 30 years from now, people are going to look back and they'll have similar feelings about today.
I'm
I
dying
know
to.
it.
I mean, I don't hope I'm not actually dying to know that, but I'm
Yeah,
dying to know what this will be.
what those will
What will be
be.
the difference? Yeah.
By the way, there's a line in here that Kiernan Shipka says where she goes, "Boy, I bet flying must be wild, because nothing has paperwork." And no 16-year-old would ever say that. Doesn't matter. It's a funny line, and it's totally true.
It's totally true. Well, yeah, like the
Well,
whole thing about how she
airplane
shows up at
travel
school.
might be the one thing that is better in the 80s.
No,
Yes,
well,
at least as
the
far as
whole point
convenience
is
goes.
everything
Yeah,
is easier in the 80s because nobody knows where anybody is. Nobody knows what anybody's paper like. So in other words, everything is easier and slightly more dangerous. So like, the
yeah,
fact that she just shows up at the school and goes, I am a new student, and the lady's like, here's your schedule because all the 11th graders have the same schedule.
right.
That was hilarious. And
And
she's
I
like, wait, what?
Yeah. And she goes, "Well, what if I can't remember what she asks." And the lady
She
just
says,
stares.
I
It's
don't
like
want to do PE. I don't like PE or whatever she
there
called.
is
Whatever
no
they called it.
deviation
Yeah.
from the norm. And again, if you're a marginalized person, there is no place for you in this world. That's the crazy thing. We've come so far. I mean, I know that we fail every day. There are microaggressions every day, but Jesus Christ, 87 was a different
I
time.
think my favorite bit about that whole thing in this was the thing with the mascots, because the mascot is the Red Devil, and
Right.
in the contemporary times, it's a literal red devil, like
Right.
a demon.
Back then, it
And
was
then when
like
she goes back in
American, yeah.
time, it's a Native American
Yeah.
And she
person,
goes,
and she's like,
there's
and
the
there's the
racism.
racism.
It's just in the
And
air. The racism is everywhere. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. There is, I have no idea if the if the diversity of the high school here is reflective of a high school in the neighborhood that she's in. I have no idea. Literally no idea. She's in a pretty diverse high school that's nobody, and that's totally cool. And maybe that's just a tip of the hat to modernity, because why bother showing?
I have no. I mean, like I've said before, I have zero frame of reference as far as
Yeah, I don't know where she is.
Like where I was in, it was.
Yeah, my school was a lot more diverse than my kids' school was.
That's because we live in Colorado now, and
No, but that's my point. I'm saying it just depends on where you are. But I was in the NASA neighborhood, so we had really great diversity.
Well, where is this supposed to be? California?
I have no idea.
I kept thinking it was California.
I have no idea. I assume California, so whatever. Somebody will have to comment on the diversity of suburban California high schools in the 80s, because I have no idea.
It depends. It's LA or is it San Francisco? I mean, it just depends.
There's also no gender diversity in this. There's I don't remember there being any gay characters. I don't think I saw any trans characters. So there's some of our contemporary time is just sort of left out of the experience. But
talking about her current, like her modern day friends.
Yes.
Yeah, I don't remember.
Anyway, so there will be a lot farther to go 30 years from now, as far as that goes. I wish I knew, if you were a 16-year-old watching this movie, I mean, I really want to know, like is this, in other words, is this basically aimed at us? Is this aimed at Gen Xers? Because would a 16-year-old today, would a Gen Zer even give a shit or have?
We can assign the 18-year-old to watch it and see what he says.
Yeah, that's true. Is this?
I mean, it's got Sabrina the Teenage Witch in it, so
that's true.
I think they're at least trying to play Gen Z some lip service.
80s, teenagers in the 80s loved Back to the Future, even though they didn't have any actual interest in the 50s. So you're right. That's an excellent point.
Well, and plus their parents. So there's probably a lot of fun of just making fun of their parents' generation. Absolutely.
Also, as a Halloween special, this is something a parents could watch. I mean, yeah, it's a rated R movie, I guess, but like it is something a scary movie that you could watch, and
Yes.
the parents could get that are Gen Xers would get like the nostalgia trip of seeing all the 80s stuff, and the kids get to watch a horror movie, on Halloween with their parents. So I'm sure it's
Yeah.
probably geared at both people, and I'm sure it plays
Families with
different.
teens, yeah.
Yeah, I'm sure it plays different to different age groups, because like her eye rolling at a lot of the 80s stuff, yeah, they kind of poke fun at her, but they're also poking fun at the people in the 80s and how
For sure.
insensitive they are. So
Yeah.
it works both ways.
It's fascinating to me. I wish, I guess we are going to have to share this with our son and see if he has any observations about it. But I think a lot of it might go over a 16-year-old's head. They just won't be interested in
But
some
not
of
the
some of these
18-year-old.
jokes.
Or the
Who
21-year-old.
knows? Yeah.
Yep, totally get it.
But Julia, you were talking about commentaries on 80s pop culture, like John Hughes and what have you. Did you have any other observations about that?
Well, no, that was mostly just I was just saying that they're called the Mollies, which is like the Heathers, but they're
Very
That was
clever.
pretty good,
they're
actually.
like the Molly
Yeah, that was
Ringwald.
original. I like
They all,
that. Yeah.
they all dress like a different Molly Ringwald, and then the mom, who's played by Julie Bowen, Claire from Modern Family,
Mhm.
she brings it into current modern day where she's still dressing like Molly Ringwald for
Yes.
Halloween, which I thought was hilarious. And then the dad is from Riverdale, so there's also some some cred for the parents and for TV currently.
It just
But
occurred to me that his hair is wrong, not
no,
Lachlan
everybody's hair is
Monroe,
wrong. The 80
but
1987, everybody's hair is wrong. That's one thing I noticed.
Charlie Gillespie plays young Blake, young dad, right? And he's got this killer sort of Tarzan mane, but in 87, I am not joking, he would have had what we now call a mullet, but nobody
Yeah.
called it that
Well,
in
if he did
1987.
have that hair, he would
Yeah.
have been a metalhead stoner, like
Right.
Yeah.
or maybe hippie, maybe kind of falling into hippie-ish.
Yes.
As a
But not
jock, no football player guy. I
Absolutely.
mean, it
No,
would be
all the
there. I'm
hair is
sure that
wrong.
there's exceptions, but like you can. I don't. A coach wouldn't have let him do. Like he would have had to been so freaking amazing at football.
Yeah.
Which I like. That's the only time anybody got to have any kind of an earring or sort of long hair or anything when they were in sports, is they were just that damn good.
Yeah.
And they didn't want to mess
His
up their
hair
win
struck
streak
me
for the high school.
his hair struck me as way more 90s sort of,
Absolutely.
But
singles,
yeah, absolutely. But yeah,
I was
that
15
would be
in that year, and I had a mullet, a solid mullet, and I had it for several years.
Oh man, I had a mullet, and I got flack. I caught flack for that hairdo for none of the reasons I should have caught flack. Like it was long hair. It was still like, that'll get your ass kicked hairdo. And now I look at it, I'm like, well, yeah, but not for that reason. Not for satanic panic reasons. That's just a dumb haircut. But like,
no, it was just a popular haircut. I mean, you think of like "Rock On," the song by David Essex. It was done again in '89 by Michael Damian, and he had that. Nobody called it a mullet until nobody wore it anymore. Once it became like,
I absolutely right. Yeah,
yeah. It was some people would call it a surfer cut if you were trying to describe it to a barber, but.
So, and one of the main reasons why I like when in college, I just grew it all out as soon as I could.
Yeah.
But my mom just hated my hair and my face. So if it was even remotely kind of like hair in your face, flock of seagull style, like she was just hated that. But which is funny because she liked a lot of like my mom grew up liking Bowie and Led Zeppelin and stuff like that. So I don't know.
All parents have triggers, man. That's just the way.
But like, so I had the mullet mainly because that was the kind of, I don't know, compromise, I suppose, at the time. But yeah, man, it was
business in the front, party in the back, baby.
Yeah.
Oh my God. Yeah, but that was anyway. This guy would have had a mullet. I really, really, really felt poor Lachlan Monroe's thing about how in the mid '80s I was in really good shape, and you're like, okay, sure, fine.
Well,
Then he gets out of the pool. He gets out of the pool.
Whoa.
It's like
And then she
this
realizes her dad.
amazing, gorgeous man. And she's like, what the hell? Oh my God,
It
that's
is
my dad.
funny to recognize that your parents were young people. They were sexual people. They worked out. They had different priorities. You know, they were different people from the ones that you've come to know, right?
Well,
And that is,
that's the thing I think this movie does best. Like, and that's the thing that it takes from Back to the
yes,
original Back to the
yeah, that's
Future.
true.
And
Yes,
I think it does it like, some of the horror stuff doesn't work quite as well, and some of the science fiction stuff doesn't work quite as well, but the sort of commentary on how we never think of our parents as sort of fully realized people that have lived lives and have been different kinds of people.
yeah,
And the fact that she's like taken aback at how kind of mean her mom was as a teenager,
Especially when
because
she said, I never would have talked to my mom that way.
yes, yeah,
and she also like is such a foul mouth on her.
yes,
I love all that stuff, and it makes it makes the character of her mother so three-dimensional. Like
yes.
I not it doesn't quite accomplish it with every single character, but I think it accomplishes it with the character of her mom, between the two actors playing this character, and I think it does it really well. And which is probably my favorite part of the movie.
Yeah.
For my criticisms of it, like that stuff worked for me really well. Like
You know how we talked about a couple years ago, which might be 8 years. We've been doing the show for like a long time, but we talked about how some movies you save just because there's a couple bits that are worth keeping. That's the stuff that I'll forgive almost anything, because that stuff works for me so well.
I also points to them that they cast well, because I think the younger actress looks enough like the older actress playing the mom in contemporary times. Like a lot of the times movies fail on that part when they're doing a thing where they're showing a character as an older person, and then she's not old, but middle-aged her.
I'm so glad they did this and not a
She's
de-aging
my
or anything
age,
like that.
so either one will work.
Yeah.
Middle-aged, like a middle-aged mother, like she it's believable that teenager grows into being that woman.
Yes.
And
Yeah.
I think that's also another really important thing there, because it makes the performances between the two actresses seem that more cohesive to me.
Yeah, that's really well said. I think they did a wonderful job. I mean, the kid who plays young Lachlan Monroe looks nothing like, but I don't care. I'm so much happier that they did this than any other means of creating the
de-aging the
illusion.
actors would have been terrible.
That would have been terrible. I do not want to see a computer animated Lachlan Monroe. Like, that makes no sense. Like, why would you bother to do that? And this is a way better solution. The other solution, and since this movie is trying to keep things within parameters roughly at the level of Back to the Future realism, they're not going to do something like in Red Hot American Summer. Did I say that right? Anyway, where they basically just ignore it. They just put a wig on everybody, which is hilarious, but that movie is more like an SNL sketch. So anyway, I love all the de-aging stuff.
I think I really did like how it's told throughout, as far as where they toe that Back to the Future line, because as the chaos starts and they realize how they're changing things bit by bit, it's not just like the photo thing, it's like the actual order of the which girls become final girls.
Yes.
Or how that's playing out, I thought that was really interesting.
That was new, right? That was interesting, where they're switching it up.
Hey, oh no, but there is the murders all happen, but so there is a slight kind of inevitability to things, but how they happen, I thought that was a really interesting way to transition that.
Well,
Yeah.
and the things that change in the modern day. So the fact that she
Right,
intervened and
exactly.
her parents hooked up earlier means now she has an older brother named Jamie, and her name is now Colette,
Yes. Yes.
which
How
was just so
fascinating was
sad. I
that?
felt so bad for her. I was like, oh my gosh, I'm sorry you lost your
That
name.
was really funny, and I liked that a lot.
And Jamie is Jamie Lee Curtis, FYI, the name,
Sure, yeah,
not
Oh,
yeah.
the one.
That was
okay.
yeah, I
Well,
thought that was there's a lot of a lot of good nods. I also kind of dig, some people may not, but I dig that all the things we know exist. So when the fact that she lives in some kind of Scream meets Haddonfield world is doesn't stop her from going, like Scream. And they go,
yes,
oh, you don't
Right.
know Scream. No, like it's
you're
both,
absolutely right. Yes.
like she lives in the world where we've seen it in Scream, we've seen it in later Halloween, where like there's evil about, and oh wait, there, the guy in the podcast, there's a bunch of diehard fans who are wearing the mask, which is just tacky and terrible, but
That
that's
was
also the
I
world we
yeah.
live in,
I loved that this movie gave, even though I partake of watching true crime stuff every so often, I do think that the sort of takedown of the true crime genre, that was maybe my second favorite thing in
That was
this
pretty
movie.
cool, and I love true crime. I'm
Yeah.
serious. I love murder shows, but yes, that was really good. Yeah. Um, I just can't. There's a lot of legitimate preaching to be done, but I can't do it myself because I definitely partake of all of that. Yeah. We should talk about the science fiction aspect. I wonder if this is what people are. You said that some of it's falling down, and really towards the last half hour, the movie is so frenetic in the same
Yeah.
again, in the same way that I kind of feel, no matter what they say, like they probably took a beat sheet of Back to the Future and put it on a column and then put another column next to it and started filling it in. And they were like, okay, the last half hour needs to be crazy as everybody's
Right.
moving and
And
trying to do a bunch of stuff at one time.
I thought that the thing with the using that centrifugal force machine, whatever
Brilliant.
you call that, was
Love.
awesome,
yeah.
hilarious, very well used. No, the time machine makes no sense. It's not nearly as fun as
A
the
DeLorean.
1.21 gigawatts as he
No,
pronounces it,
I
and like the all that stuff. There's a lot more fun in the Back to the Future science sci-fi part of it. This is just whatever. It's like
I
okay,
did like I like the
forget.
prototype in the old arcade cabinet because because that's also that arcade geekery is also in my
Yeah.
wheelhouse. So I was
Yeah,
like, oh, that's kind of cool. That's a perfect
yeah.
place to take it from the photo booth to the arcade cabinet and then
Hmm.
into and I also liked we have a new modern way of telling literal time
Mm,
countdown is it has to be paired with your phone.
Hmm.
yes.
And like, what do you do when you can't get any oh, look, the satellite thing, all that stuff. I thought that was really clever and cool. And I also really like that, her friends, it becomes her friend. She sees her friend and her friend's mom,
Hmm.
and the fact she goes, look, I really dug the part where she's like, hey, if you start talking about time travel, you have to expect that can exist. So
Yes. Oh,
what you're
yeah.
saying makes sense. Like I
Yes.
thought that was
She
because
was
I
so
always
clever.
say
Yeah.
that the problem, like people go, oh, if I could time travel, I would change blah blah blah. And my reaction is always, well, there's no time travel because if you are saying that, it means you couldn't do it.
Yeah.
If you're saying instead of doing it, because what would happen was if you had a thing, you're like, if I could time travel, I would do blah. Blah would just be done.
That assumes that time is a river. If time's
Right, right,
not a
right.
river, then
But in general,
Which is what
like,
happens with Loki.
yeah,
I'm
right.
loving Loki this season because in Loki, they literally go, well, he goes, well, if I only had this gadget, and then he goes, oh, here it is, because that at that moment
yes.
when he
Right.
thinks that,
That is the
Yeah.
Bill and
they
Ted
send it back.
theory of time travel, where
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
you can just go
Yeah.
back in time and leave
exactly,
something
which I
for
loved.
yourself. Yes.
Yeah, the thing that you're talking about, I wish this was different, would be different.
Right.
Mhm.
You might not even would ever have that conversation because it would just be.
It's
Yeah.
also the Doctor Who thing. There was one of those
Sure.
where he had a Sonic that could do a thing that because they needed it to
Right.
be done. No, I get such a kick out of that. I want to say about the the setting of the fairway, the the carnival,
Mhm.
that's exactly how I felt when we went to this place
Lakeside.
here that's Lakeside Amusement Park, which is one of the, what do they call it, White City or something,
It was one
amusement
of the
parks.
white cities,
Yeah,
which yes,
uh, it's the unfortunately named White City, but not inaccurate.
right.
So whenever we went there, it's like about half of it is still functional as an amusement park, and the other half is just kind of like this ghost town. And so I really did genuinely feel the whole time we were walking around in there, like any second now I was going to walk through a portal to the past where everything is suddenly alive and colorful. And that's exactly what happens. I was so
I
excited.
want to explain something about Lakeside Amusement Park in Denver, Colorado, just as an aside to the audience. Lakeside Amusement Park was created during the so-called movement of the Beautiful City movement, where they would build these white cities with towers and hundreds of blazing white balls and
Like,
light
yeah,
bulbs, and you'd take a train from downtown, and
pavilions.
everybody would carry their pinafores and their best dress and go, and
No,
bumper
yeah,
boats
they're
and
parasols, yeah.
so where it is today in 2023, it is still standing. It is privately owned. When something breaks, they don't fix it. It's still open. The bumper boats still work. There is a Ferris wheel that burnt
And they
down
just left it.
in like the 60s. It's still standing. Just this big burnt Ferris
Wow.
wheel. There are places where you walk through and you really feel like you are not sure where you are. It is a giant,
It's a trip.
weird liminal space that you can also picnic in. It is a very strange place. Good for
My
dates. I recommend it.
my favorite of those areas is when they have the just barely functional, but often in a tent arcade.
Yes.
Those are my favorites because at like we would, when I was in marching band, we would go. There was a big rodeo that we would go to, and there was basically an arcade and a tent. And I spent most of my time there. Like I didn't give a crap about rodeo.
Uh-huh.
Once we were through marching, like I've been a diehard arcade fanatic for years, but I like when there's a sad. You're sad when a bunch of the games don't work because maybe you want to play those, but like that kind of off kilter sense, and a few of the rides you're like. As an adult, I don't feel like anybody should
Oh,
probably
I
go
thought
on
that I was gonna
those.
die when I got on one of those. Honestly,
Right?
I was like,
No,
"Wait,
he
am I too
literally, yeah,
heavy?"
Jason literally took one of the roller coasters and he was surprised he didn't die. He was like, I'm
I
really
really felt like,
Yeah.
"Oh, I'm way too heavy for this. This is gonna throw me off." And, I'm surprised
Yeah.
it didn't. I mean, honestly, yeah, that was a
Yeah,
mistake.
but my when I love going to a slightly dangerous amusement park, but the yeah, let's throw some arcade games in here. Now, sadly, it's because more economical. A lot of this has been replaced with like either newer arcade games or the like kind of emulation arcades where it
Huh.
makes the most sense because you can put like 50 games in a cabinet and then each one of those still gets a quarter, so you don't
Hmm.
have to have as much space. But I don't know, that's where I'm at when I go to one of those.
Wow. Man, I wanna go back in time now. All right. No, how
like, I-
cool would
like I
that be?
always say, Jason, for you it would have just been just fine. For me, not as much.
Yeah, I don't there's things I would like to see or maybe get, but I don't have a nostalgia for I want to be back there.
Yeah,
Yeah.
me neither.
I don't, again, like for the same reason I was talking about earlier, like I don't want to catch, to worry about my life
Yeah.
in a small I don't want to have that kind of schism. And all the there's a lot of stuff there's a lot of interesting things that I kind of would like to experience again. I would if I you know what if I went back in time, my wish, and I know we're a little far afield, I want to go back to a back in the day Pizza Hut, and
Oh,
I want to see if it was really better or if it's nostalgia.
it was better,
I can't prove that it is, but I
but
do
you
also
want the
wish it's
sit-down
somewhere.
Pizza Hut.
Yeah,
You
no,
want the
that's what I'm
kind
saying.
yeah.
I would like to find somewhere. I wonder if there's somewhere in the United States where they said, "Screw this. We're keeping this Pizza Hut 80s style."
Yeah.
And the recipes are the same and everything. I would love to compare and contrast, I think, and that's not world changing. This is definitely not like you could fix Reaganomics or all this stuff that you would wouldn't you like to have seen these bands? Like, yes, there's a couple of concert like tours I would have liked to have seen, but one of my like just ancillary, just weirdo, I would love to know if it really is
Yeah, that would be good.
Different or not, or if it's just my nostalgia that said no, that Pizza Hut was great, and I know, although it would be crushing if you're like, oh, this was always crap.
Well, I'm sure that it was probably sugary than you would enjoy. I mean,
I doubt that.
Julia will remember, I would ride my 10-speed bike to the Pizza Hut where I worked as a waiter. Julia came and saw me at least once
Bunch
at
times.
the Pizza Hut. I remember
Yep.
that. You know,
Anyway, that would be
Nin-
my go back in time
1987
with
that was. All right, we should probably one more thing I wanted to say about that centrifugal force machine. That was cool. The notion
That was
of
awesome.
them fighting the centrifugal force. It's so funny. We were talking earlier about the metaphor of the internet as a centrifugal force machine for opinions, but they have a centrifugal force machine where the guy gets up and walks along the wall, which of course you can do. You know, it's just it takes practice and it's really hard. You know, but
and there's probably somebody doing that depending on how lax the particular fair that you
yes,
were at.
sure.
Like some fairs, no, you can't, don't move your, spit out your gum, and others were like, if you choke, you choke.
Exactly.
Like whatever, you want to get up and walk, you want to roll all the way across your friends, have at it. I don't get paid enough to care.
Right, exactly.
Like I have my Walkman on, and either depending, I have Rush or Skinnerd, or depending on the area of the or AC/DC, depending on the area of the country you're in, or maybe some country station. Other than that, like some places were sticklers, and most places, oh, you want to turn upside down? Well, when I turn this off, you're gonna hit your head. Screw you,
Yeah,
fine.
exactly. Yes.
You were tall enough to get into this machine. Anything goes, because they don't pay me enough, and I don't care.
There were some like malicious carnival workers who would just stop the thing suddenly to throw somebody across the
there's
thing.
no doubt. No. There's no doubt that was the thing.
Do those rides still exist?
I think so.
I don't think so.
I think it because there's all those carnivals that are just like that come to like a parking lot.
Yes.
Yeah, but I don't.
And they have
this?
Gravitron.
I don't know. That's a really good.
Gravitron, is that what it's called?
Yeah, I think so. That's what I mean. It's regional. I think a lot of those. But yeah, I think it was Gravitron, if I remember.
Fascinating. Well, anyway, I loved that, and that was good thinking. Somebody was brainstorming and said, "Oh, wait a minute, what about those things?" Brilliant, love it. All right, let's get our final thoughts, and then get into any endorsements, which will be fun. So, Julia, I hope you've enjoyed talking about this as much as I have. This has been a real blast. What are your thoughts?
So much fun. It is Gravitron. I'm looking that up. It says, why was the Gravitron banned? So I don't think they still exist.
You haven't been to the wrong / right.
It says a Gravitron in 1991 spun itself apart at the Missouri State Fair, injuring 7 children. Well, of course it did.
Wow.
Anyway,
Jeffrey Reddick needs to know about that. That's
I think it's my theory that there are still Gravitrons out there. There's your horror movie. There's your other horror movie, right? Like just a Dangerous Rides horror movie.
That sounds like something. That sounds like a Stephen King novella called something. That would be like just Dangerous.
Just called Dangerous Rides. Like, I mean, if we're talking, a Stephen King novella.
I really now I want to publish a novella called Dangerous Rides. So that's a great idea. Julia, I'm sorry.
No, I have really enjoyed this conversation. It's been a lot of fun. I still love it. I was wondering if by the end I would be like, yeah, I see what they're talking about. No, I mean, I see the only thing I see what they're talking about is that the sci-fi is kind of just meh. Like they don't really give it any time or energy. But everything else was fun. I enjoyed it. So I don't know what the internet is talking about, but I never know what the internet's talking about. So
we're just as well. I've left Twitter. So
I never got on. I have a Twitter account, but I never ever spent a minute on Twitter.
Yeah, you were Dear David for Twitter. That was it. Yeah.
That's my endorsement's gonna be. So we'll come back to that.
Yeah. Drew, what about you?
I had a good time talking about it. I think I think it's a fun movie. I'm not gonna get. I don't understand how it became such a hotly debated topic so quickly. I'm sort of fascinated by that in some ways because I think it speaks to the cultural divisions that we are currently experiencing as a country. But I am not buying into the hype either way. Like, I don't think it's the greatest movie ever made, but I also think it is a fun direct to TV Halloween themed horror movie, and I think that's perfectly fine. And I will say this: I've seen a lot of other people bring up The Final Girls as a counterpoint to this one, and I'm glad that movie is getting some love because I think that movie is great. And
did we review that or
No,
I
no?
don't
we
think
have
we
not.
did.
Maybe we should do that one next week just to compare.
Maybe. Yeah.
Is it based on the novel Final Girls by?
No, it is
Another
a
time
Friday.
travel.
It is a Friday. Well, it's sort of how this is Back to the Future with a slasher. This is Purple Rose of Cairo, but instead of a silent film, they go into a Friday the 13th movie.
I definitely have not seen it, but it sounds interesting.
It's a good film, and it is definitely comparable to this with the mother-daughter relationship. But I think that movie is a little better than this one. But that being said, I did really enjoy watching this. I watched it twice. I didn't find it to be a drag to watch either time. So while I think I liked it the least out of everybody on the podcast, that doesn't mean I hated it. And I think that we often as a culture forget that you can come down on a movie and like this and be like, oh yeah, that was okay, I enjoyed it. And that's a perfectly normal opinion to have. Anyway, that's where I land on this.
So Final Girls 2015. Okay, I we definitely need to do it wherever it fits on the calendar. So we'll talk about that. Don't forget that. Got to remember. Okay. Thank you, Drew. Tony, what about you?
So I keep forgetting. It's funny that Drew's mentioned it several times, but I hope people's eyes don't roll when I mention Fantastic Fest so much. It's just a big part of like our, the way I view kind of what our slate might be when I see a bunch of stuff, and it was a week plus of movies. But so actually I got to see it on the big screen, which I forget like. Oh yeah, well this is coming to this. Most people are seeing this on Amazon on their TV or laptop or whatever. So I kind of that's why I had to watch it to make sure that it wasn't just cool, I'm seeing it on the big screen. That's the difference. Which is kind of why I know I talked about last week, but it is kind of why when things like When Evil Lurks come out before they hit Shudder, I try to tell people in case you do want to get that big screen look at stuff. For me though, I still think it's really fun. I think it does everything it's supposed to do. I like the dark comedy aspect of it. It just I totally see where Drew is coming from. It works a little better for me, but it's not perhaps a perfect film, but what is,
Right.
I really dug it. And I was really happy that, again, we could all see it so close to after I was raising my hand and going, hey, let's check this movie out. When that happens, I really dig it because, I want to support cool people doing cool things. And I think that there's a lot of that here.
Excellent. Thank you. Thank you very, very much. Gosh, does that leave me? I think I've jabbered on enough, but this was a real blast, and I'm really glad that you thought of it, and I'm glad that it's leading us to some other films. I'm glad that I'm not a part of the conversation online right now, so we can just have a pure response. And I also want to really appreciate the Mia Sara jacket that the main character wears in this movie.
Sloane.
Because it's pretty cool. Yeah, Karen Shipka has a jacket that is basically Sloane's jacket from Ferris
See again,
Bueller.
John Hughes.
Yeah, that's right. It was a John Hughes reference. You're absolutely right. So very cool. Let's do endorsements. Julia,
I have several things this time. I have so I recommended several years ago that the only reason I had gotten on Twitter was because I was obsessed with the Dear David Twitter feed, and now there's a Dear David movie, which is just fantastic. I enjoyed it so much. It's really, really fun. It's about this super creepy ass ghost kid who may or may not be killing people. Anyway, the real life thing was just the creepy ass ghost kid, and then they've turned it into more of a horror movie. But so fun. Jason interviewed the director. Is that correct?
That's right. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's also on the Castle of Horror podcast
Feed. Yeah.
feed. Yeah. And again, sorry, Drew, but I'm loving Loki. It's
I'm
just
not
so fun.
anti-Loki. I just haven't seen it.
I know. It's a fun
okay.
season. Fun season. And oh yeah, and I was watching today Encounters, which is about different towns that have had a bunch of people see UFOs. That's a Netflix series that is really interesting. Whether you believe in it or not, it's very interesting. So those are mine.
Very good. Thank you. Drew, what about you? Endorsements?
I mean, it barely needs my endorsement because, you know, I think every horror fan is aware that there is a new Mike Flanagan miniseries out on Netflix, and this time around it's a Edgar Allan Poe pastiche.
Yeah.
You know, this is going to be his last mini series on Netflix, and I think he's going out with a bang. It is easily the most violent of all of the different series that he's done. It's also kind of a stealth, like a stealth anthology series with the actual House of Usher story sort of serving as the wraparound to a bunch of other modernized Poe adaptations. And I thought that was a really interesting take on them because I wasn't really sure how he was going to do it when I learned. You know, the cast is great. You know, I want to, you know, give a special shout out to Mark Hamill because I think, you know, there's some other, you know, people that are his regulars that do amazing and are getting called out a lot online, you know, rightfully so for being great in this. But Mark Hamill in particular does a wonderful kind of dangerous but odd little man character, and I just love, you know, how Mark Hamill has evolved from being a leading man type to like a weird character actor over his career.
Yes.
So you know, this, I got a real kick out of him in this, but it's you know, the entire cast is uniformly really good in this. Also, want to give a shout out to the new Goosebumps series on Hulu and Disney Plus. I have zero nostalgia for the original R.L. Stine books or television show. I just saw it and I saw the trailer and I thought it looked fun. Jamie is a bit of an R.L. Stine fan, so she was very excited about it. And they actually kind of Mike Flanagan it with this because there's, you know, a monster of the week in which they loosely adapt a different R.L. Stine thing, but there's also an ongoing story, and I've really enjoyed that so far. Third thing, I have to make a shameless plug. Coming this Wednesday on Global Comics, that's Comics with an X. Our long national nightmare is over. You can finally enjoy a new Halloween Man comic. It'll be part one of what I'm calling our take on Crisis on Infinite Earths.
Wow.
It is a horror version of a superhero crossover story. And because when I was a kid and I first read Crisis on Infinite Earths, I thought it was kind of a scary idea. And so this is a story called Entropy. It's going to be a 3-parter. This is the first chapter of it. And I think it'll be interesting to see the reactions of people when they read it because, you know, it's funny, 5 years ago, when I first wrote it, you know, the idea of a multiverse was not that mainstream of an idea, but it's always been one of my favorite tropes in science fiction and in superhero comics. And then between the time I originally wrote it and then the time that it took to make the comic, you know, we've had all this media come out that has sort of mainstreamed the idea of a
Yeah.
multiverse. And so, I think it's actually people are now primed for this story that I thought was probably going to maybe be a field too far for some of my, because not everybody that reads Halloween Man are superhero people,
Yeah.
like or comic book people. It's and this is definitely leaning into heavily into a lot of comic book tropes or superhero comic tropes, but through a horrific lens. And we definitely play it, like, with the idea of what would it be to run into an alternate version of a loved one, and the idea of extinguishing different realities and things like that, but do it in a ooey gooey sort of Sam Raimi kind of way. So
Awesome.
I hope people like it. It's definitely one of the best looking books we've ever put out, and it's got a great cover by Matt Frank. So check it out.
I can't wait to check it out. I interviewed Sarah Risher, who was the executive at New Line who greenlighted Nightmare on Elm Street and was very involved in the production of that film and held it together when they ran out of money. And she had to go. She was very pregnant, and she went to everybody in the cast and the crew and said, "We've run out of money. So if you guys can hang tight for a couple of weeks, don't take other jobs, because we're going to get refunded and we're going to keep shooting this movie." And everybody did stick around. And because she said, "Look, I'm in as much trouble as everybody else is. I don't have anywhere to go. Let's keep this movie happening." And Nightmare on Elm Street turned out to be one of the most important horror films of a generation. So it was a really fun conversation, and you can find that on our feed. And if you're into the Usher thing, John Carpenter's Usher Down, which I was lucky enough to write the script for.
Jason Henderson's Usher Down.
Yes, well, fair enough. Anyway, that is out. And it is basically Raise the Titanic with the House of Usher. They find it's 100 years later.
So you did have stuff to endorse.
I guess so. When you said, "Well, what if you asked the right question?" Which, "Well, what have you been
Shameless
up to?"
plug.
And yeah. So there we go.
Awesome.
Check out Usher Down. It's a graphic novel from Storm King. Let me know what you think, and I think it would make a fun companion to the new Fall of the House of Usher.
Oh, by the way, I don't know, it's a bit costly subscription, Drew, but if you do dig it, Rain has been doing masterclass. It's online courses with writers and artists and stuff, and there is, if you're interested on hanging out and watching it with Jamie, there is an R.L. Stine masterclass.
Oh, really?
And she's been since she's been writing, she's been watching. She just watched Steve Martin on comedy.
Oh, wow.
So the subscription is actually, there's a lot of really cool people, and she's learned a lot. And we've watched a few together.
I've looked at masterclass before because they had a Neil Gaiman one.
His is pretty good.
Ago.
Yeah,
it is too expensive for me, alas.
Yeah, no, I if you're ever, if funds ever do become available, Rain has found it pretty cool. I don't know if there's any way to do like a smaller, or one person, but I just thought of it because she watched the whole R.L. Stine, because she's writing a horror, YA horror thing right now. So she wanted to see what was up. So I just thought that would be cool. So I've been also enjoying Our Flag Means Death. And although it deals with we've only seen the first 2 episodes, it deals with a lot of tough subject matter. We've also started watching Lessons in Chemistry, which seems to be pretty interesting. And
we read that book. It was great.
Yeah, so the show is, it's tough. There's a lot of tough stuff going on in it, but I thought the show so far seems to be really, really fascinating. Also, I can't say a lot because the embargo's over, but I do want to say that I think people are going to dig the new Monarch show, about the science team in the new Godzilla universe, in the American Godzilla universe. I got screeners for the first 5 episodes, and there's a trailer for that, Monarch Legacy of Monsters. It's probably not for people who want a lot of so far, 5 episodes in, it's probably not for the people who want a lot of monster wrestling. but it's not called Godzilla, right? So if you like X-Files, if you like Ultra Q, if you like seeing Kurt Russell and his son play different time versions of themselves, which I think is just perfect casting. Like it's done. I thought that was really well, done really well. I dug it. It's not, maybe perfect. I mean, again, I only saw the first 5 episodes. I want to talk about it more when we can all talk about it. And they kind of said, hey, the embargo is lifted because we showed the trailer on the 13th. And so there's a few opinion pieces here and there on the internet. I think it's going to probably be divisive depending on what you were wanting out of the series, as far as what I can tell. But the trailer's out there, so you can kind of start to form your own opinions. But I was digging it. Rain was digging it. So as a fan, like I said, like Ultra Q, X-Men, kind of where we go with the world of the new Godzilla legendary universe. I think it's kind of cool. I think there were some other movies possibly. I mean, there's still stuff coming out on Shudder. I'm drawing a blank right now on what all we've seen, but those are mine for now. If I think of anything, I'll either hold it to next week or post it online. But there's a lot of good stuff out there. So
I hope people come onto the Facebook page and let us know what they think also, because we could always also use your recommendations for sure. And this has been so fun. I'd love to hear if you have specifically any memories of ridiculously laissez-faire or unsafe aspects of the 1980s, or if you're a young person and you just simply don't believe any of this stuff, come and ask us questions about all that, because obviously we're happy to answer way too much about all that. So yes, everyone, be excellent to one another. Thank you so much. This has been a true blast. I can't wait to come back next week with whatever the hell is on the schedule, and maybe it'll be Final Girls. We may have to like mix things up. All right. Thanks, everybody. Bye.
Good night.
Good night.